You're not bad at communicating, you're just testing instead of asking. When you go quiet or drop hints, you're hoping the other person will read your mind. Here's the sentence that changes everything. I want to say this clearly instead of hinting, because the relationship matters to me. It stops the guessing, the resentment, and the late-night replay. This sentence changes the dynamic, but what you do after saying it is what really matters. That's explained in today's Stoic Focus Lab episode. You reread the text you sent 3 times, watching the typing bubble appear and disappear. Sunday night, phone glowing, chest tight, brain running laps. You tell yourself you're being chill, that you're giving them space, that you don't want to be too much. But what you're really doing is waiting to see if they'll do the right thing without you having to say it. And the longer you wait, the more your mind turns into a courtroom. You're collecting evidence, replaying old moments, and building a case that they don't care the way you do. Then the bubble stops. No reply. Or worse, some casual answer that misses the point completely. And you feel it, that hot flicker of anger, that drop in your stomach, the urge to type something sharp, or to go silent as punishment. You weren't asking a question. You were running a test. Here's the slightly uncomfortable truth. Testing people instead of talking to them doesn't protect the relationship, it slowly trains it to fail. You're not low maintenance. You're creating a game where the other person loses for not reading your mind, and you lose because you never get your needs met out loud. And even if they pass once, you don't relax. You just create a harder test next time, because the real issue wasn't their behavior. The real issue was your fear of being clear. Here's your immediate micro-win, one sentence you can use today. I want to say this clearly instead of hinting, because the relationship matters to me. Use it exactly like that. You don't need to explain your whole childhood, or list the last 5 times they disappointed you. Just that sentence. In the next 10 minutes, it changes your posture. Instead of watching for signals, you name what's real. Instead of trying to control their response with silence, you give the relationship a chance to respond to the truth. You stop spending energy on should they already know, and you shift into here's what I need. That alone reduces your stress, even before they answer, because you've stopped dragging your need through a maze. Educational content inspired by classical Stoic texts. Not medical, psychological, financial, or legal advice. Now let's name the pain and the stakes, because this isn't just a communication style. This is a pattern that touches everything. At work, you test your manager by staying quiet about capacity, then feel betrayed when deadlines pile up. In friendships, you test loyalty by disappearing to see who checks on you, then you judge the people who assume you're busy. In relationships, you test love by dropping hints about dates, appreciation, effort, initiation, then you feel hurt when the hint lands like a paper airplane. What this is costing you is simple. You're turning closeness into a guessing contest, and every guess that misses becomes resentment you have to carry. And resentment doesn't stay contained. It leaks into the way you answer. It changes your tone. It makes you interpret neutral moments as proof. It makes you shorter with people you actually care about. It makes you scroll longer at night, looking for distraction because your nervous system is still braced for disappointment. You can love someone and still sabotage the bond if you keep using hidden tests as your main strategy. Here's what you'll be able to do by the end of this lesson. You'll understand why testing feels safer than speaking, so you can catch it early instead of after damage is done. You'll be able to turn a vague, emotional "why don't you ever" into a clear request that a real person can actually respond to. And you'll have a simple way to communicate needs in love, family, and friendships without sounding demanding, needy, or dramatic, just honest and clean. Stay with me until the very end, and while you're here, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. First, you'll see what's happening internally when you set a test, what fear it's trying to cover, and why it creates pressure instead of connection. Next, you'll learn a direct, calm way to turn unspoken expectations into spoken requests that protect your dignity. Then, you'll practice keeping that clarity when emotions spike and you're tempted to retreat into silence. Finally, you'll watch a real-life moment play out where the old reaction almost takes over, and you'll see exactly how the tools change the outcome without a big dramatic speech. And later, I'm going to bring you into a situation you'll recognize instantly, a normal day, a small disappointment, and then that familiar urge to see if they notice instead of saying what you need. I'll show you the exact point where you usually spiral, and the exact sentence that stops it. Here's the sentence to start with. Before you explain anything else, I'm noticing I want to test you right now, so I'm going to say what I actually need instead. Say it calmly. No sarcasm. No buildup. That one line alone disarms the situation, because it moves you from indirect pressure into direct ownership. Why this works is simple. Tests create tension because they split your attention. Part of you is watching their behavior. Part of you is judging what it means. And part of you is preparing an emotional response if they fail. Your nervous system stays activated the entire time. When you name the urge to test and replace it with a clear statement, your attention comes back under your control. You're no longer managing outcomes. You're communicating reality. That shift alone reduces emotional load, even if the answer isn't perfect. Picture a common North American moment. You've been carrying more of the household load lately. Dishes. Scheduling. Remembering. You don't say anything, but you stop doing one small task to see if they notice. They don't. They sit down, scroll their phone, and suddenly your chest tightens. You feel invisible. The test fails, and now you're angry about something that was never spoken. If instead you pause and say, I'm noticing I want to see if you'll notice, so I'm just going to say it, I need help with the dishes tonight, the entire dynamic changes. You're no longer building a case. You're making a request a real human can respond to. Here's the tiny action you can take today. Catch the moment right before the test. It usually shows up as a thought like, they should already know, or let's see if they care. The second you hear that sentence in your head, stop. Take one breath. Then say the microscript out loud or in text. That's it. No follow-up paragraph. No justification. Just the sentence and the need. Now slow this down for 10 seconds. Feel your feet on the floor. Let your shoulders drop. Notice the urge to add more words to make the request safer. You don't need to soften it with apologies. You don't need to harden it with an edge. Calm clarity is enough. This is the difference between asking from stability and asking from anxiety. What often surprises people is how much respect this earns. Not because the other person suddenly becomes perfect, but because you've stopped asking them to pass an invisible exam. Even if they say no, you are no longer trapped in interpretation mode. You don't have to decode tone, timing, or intention. You have information. And information is grounding. This also protects you from self-betrayal. Every time you run a test, you delay your own needs in the hope that someone else will rescue you from having to speak. Over time, that trains you to distrust yourself. Saying the need clearly, even when it feels uncomfortable, rebuilds self-trust. You start to see yourself as someone who can handle honesty, not someone who has to hide behind games. There's a quiet confidence that comes from this. You're not demanding. You're not collapsing. You're not performing emotional gymnastics to get a result. You're simply stating what's real and letting the relationship respond. That's control in the Stoic sense, not control over people, but control over your own actions. And here's the small callback to what I teased earlier. This exact sentence is what stops that Sunday night spiral before it turns into silence or a sharp message you regret. It's the pivot point. Miss it, and the test runs itself. Catch it, and you change the entire tone of the interaction without escalating anything. You're standing in the kitchen, half listening, half already irritated. They're talking about their day, and you nod, but your mind is stuck on the thing they didn't do. They didn't follow up. They didn't ask. They didn't remember. You feel the familiar urge rise, pull back a little, get quiet, let them feel the distance and figure it out. That's the move you've used before. It feels controlled. It feels dignified. And it feels safer than saying what's actually bothering you. Here's the mistake hiding inside that moment. You're confusing emotional restraint with emotional clarity. Going quiet feels like strength, but most of the time it's just an unspoken expectation dressed up as self-control. You're still testing, you've just switched from hints to withdrawal. And withdrawal doesn't create understanding. It creates anxiety, guessing, or defensiveness on the other side, even if the other person can't name why. The correction is simple, but it will feel exposed the first few times. Replace silence with a clean, time-bound statement. Here's the script: I'm starting to shut down, so I want to say this now instead of later. Then you name one concrete thing. Not a character judgment. Not a history lesson. One present need or feeling tied to the moment. Why this works is straightforward. Silence makes the other person search for danger. The nervous system starts scanning. Did I do something wrong? Is this about me? Should I fix it or avoid it? Meanwhile, your nervous system is loading resentment. When you interrupt that pattern with a brief, present moment statement, you stop the escalation before it hardens. You're not asking them to fix everything. You're preventing the emotional temperature from dropping into ice. Take a familiar example. You were expecting a call. It didn't come. When they finally text, your instinct is to reply with something short and flat. One word. Delayed. You want them to notice the change and ask what's wrong. That's the test. Instead, you pause and say, I noticed I felt disappointed when I didn't hear from you earlier, and I didn't want that to turn into distance. That's it. You haven't accused them. You haven't collapsed. You've simply named the internal shift before it became behavior. Here's your tiny action for today. The next time you feel yourself getting quieter on purpose, don't force cheerfulness and don't disappear. Just flag the shift. One sentence. Even something as simple as, I'm getting a little tense and I don't want to carry it silently. That sentence alone often resets the interaction because it replaces mystery with honesty. Now interrupt the pattern physically for a moment. Take one slow breath through your nose. Let the exhale be longer than the inhale. Feel where your body tightens when you want to withdraw: jaw, chest, and stomach. You're not trying to relax it completely. You're just noticing it instead of acting it out. That pause is where choice lives. A lot of people worry this will make them sound fragile or needy. In practice, it does the opposite. Silence with expectation feels heavy. Clear, brief naming feels grounded. You're not handing over responsibility for your emotions. You're showing that you're aware of them and choosing not to weaponize them. This also protects you from the delayed explosion. When you don't speak in the moment, the emotion doesn't disappear. It stores. Then it comes out later over something small: tone, timing, a harmless comment, and suddenly the reaction doesn't match the trigger. Speaking earlier keeps scale proportional. Small feeling, small statement. No backlog. Notice how this connects to what we opened with. The tests that hurt the most aren't dramatic. They're quiet. They look like patience. They sound like it's fine. This correction cuts in before that spiral starts. It's the moment where you choose to communicate instead of accumulating. And in the next part, I'm going to push this under real pressure, when emotions spike and the stakes are higher, and show you how to keep this same clarity without getting pulled into old reflexes. There's a belief that keeps this pattern alive, especially under stress: if I have to ask, it doesn't count. You tell yourself that real care should be spontaneous, that if someone truly understood you, they would just know. And the moment you feel disappointed, that belief tightens its grip. You decide that saying something would cheapen it, so you stay quiet and let the test run. Under pressure, this belief feels like self-respect. In reality, it's a shortcut to disconnection. Here's the instruction that replaces it, and the stakes are high if you don't use it. Treat clarity as respect, not weakness. The moment you feel urgency, your pulse quickens, your thoughts speed up. That's your cue to simplify, not intensify. You don't raise the emotional volume. You lower the complexity. One need. One sentence. One moment. Use this script under pressure, I'm feeling a lot right now, so I'm going to be direct. What I need is, then you stop. You don't justify. You don't argue your case. You let the sentence stand on its own. This matters because pressure is when old habits try to take over. Tests feel tempting when you're tired, hungry, stressed, or scared of losing connection. This script keeps you in response instead of reaction. Picture a high-stakes, very normal scenario. You're in the middle of a money conversation. Bills, timing, priorities. The tone shifts. You feel misunderstood. Your instinct is to go quiet, or to drop a loaded comment and see how they react. Instead, you pause and say, I'm feeling overwhelmed, and what I need right now is reassurance that we're on the same team. That doesn't solve the entire financial plan, but it stabilizes the moment. It keeps the conversation from turning into a power struggle. Why this holds under pressure is simple. When stress rises, the brain narrows. It wants certainty fast. Tests are a way to chase certainty without risk. Direct requests are riskier, but they're cleaner. They don't ask the other person to guess. They ask them to respond. And response is the only place real connection can happen. Slow this moment down. Before you speak, feel your breath. Not to calm yourself completely, but to anchor. Let the breath be the punctuation before the sentence. You're signaling to your body that you're choosing intentional action. That small pause is the difference between saying something you'll replay later and saying something you can stand by. This approach also reframes disappointment. If you ask clearly and the answer is no, you haven't been rejected as a person. You've received information. That information might be uncomfortable, but it's workable. Hidden tests rob you of that clarity. They keep you guessing, interpreting, and often assuming the worst. Directness replaces imagined meanings with reality. This is where Stoic thinking quietly supports the move. You focus on what's in your control, your words, your timing, your tone, and you release what isn't. You don't try to manage how they feel or react. You manage your own actions. That's not emotional detachment. That's emotional discipline. Notice how this prepares you for what's coming next. There's a moment ahead where the old pattern almost wins, where silence or sarcasm is one breath away. And you'll see how using this exact structure, under pressure, changes the outcome without a dramatic confrontation. It's late afternoon, and the day already feels heavier than it should. You're driving home, traffic crawling, replaying the morning in your head. You asked a simple question before leaving, nothing dramatic, and the answer you got felt dismissive. Not hostile. Just flat. You told yourself it wasn't worth bringing up. You told yourself you'd deal with it later. But now your jaw is tight, your shoulders are up near your ears, and you're rehearsing two different versions of silence for when you walk through the door. This is where the old pattern almost takes over. You imagine being polite but distant. You imagine doing your part and letting them notice the change. Part of you wants to see if they'll sense something's off without you saying a word. That urge feels familiar. It feels controlled. It feels like leverage. You catch it. You remember that testing always starts with delay. Withholding. Waiting. So before you even pull into the driveway, you slow your breath at a red light. Inhale through your nose. Longer exhale. You're not trying to calm down completely. You're trying to interrupt the slide into reaction. You put both feet on the floor of the car and feel the seat under you for a moment. This is the pause where choice comes back online. Inside, the atmosphere is normal. Too normal. They ask how your day was. The old version of you would give a short answer and see what happens next. You feel that impulse rise again. Instead, you use the first tool. You say, calmly, I'm noticing I want to pull back right now, so I want to say this clearly instead. The room doesn't freeze. Nothing explodes. You've named the shift before it became behavior. You continue, keeping it specific. When my question got brushed off this morning, I felt dismissed, and I don't want that to turn into distance between us. You stop there. No history. No tone. No verdict on their character. Just one moment, named early. There's a pause. Not the dangerous kind. Just the kind where someone processes new information. You feel the urge to fill the silence, to soften it, to add an explanation that makes it easier for them. You don't. You let the sentence stand. That's the second tool in action, clarity without overfunctioning. They respond, not perfectly, but honestly. They didn't realize how it landed. They were distracted. They explain, briefly. You notice something important inside yourself, you're still steady. You're not scanning for proof. You're listening. Even if the explanation isn't satisfying, you already feel less charged because you didn't store the feeling. You aired it. Later, during dinner, a smaller moment pops up. A comment about plans that change the evening. You feel disappointment spike again, faster this time. This is where pressure usually wins. You feel your body tense, and for a split second, sarcasm feels tempting. Instead, you use the under pressure script. I'm feeling a lot right now, so I'm going to be direct. What I need is a heads up before plans change. You say it evenly. Not sharp. Not apologetic. You feel your feet on the floor as you say it. You let the breath finish before the sentence ends. That physical grounding keeps the emotion from flooding the words. The request lands. It's clear. It's workable. There's no guessing involved. What's different tonight isn't that everything goes your way. It's that nothing snowballs. There's no silent scorekeeping. No internal monologue cataloging offenses. When the evening winds down, your nervous system isn't buzzing. You're not lying in bed replaying conversations, wishing you'd spoken sooner or differently. You did speak. Early. Cleanly. As you turn the lights off, you notice the outcome. The house feels quieter, not tense. Your body feels tired in a normal way, not wired. You didn't win an argument. You didn't extract a promise. You did something more subtle and more powerful. You stopped testing. You communicated. And that's the real shift. Not a dramatic confrontation. Not perfect understanding. Just fewer hidden games, fewer assumptions, and one more night where the relationship didn't carry the weight of something unsaid. At the center of everything you work through in this lesson is a single distinction that quietly changes how you experience pressure. Reacting hands control to the moment, responding takes it back. When you react, your attention scatters outward. You're tracking tone, approval, imagined meanings, future consequences, and whether you're about to lose ground. When you respond, even if the emotion hasn't fully settled, your attention comes back under your command. You're no longer trying to erase what happened. You're deciding what happens next. That shift is the real definition of emotional control. First, you saw how the problem doesn't start with words at all. It starts with that internal urge to wait, withdraw, or see if they notice. That urge feels restrained, but it's already a test running in the background. Then you learned how to interrupt it by naming the impulse and replacing it with one clear statement, instead of letting the test silently shape your behavior. Next, you practice cutting off silence before it hardens into distance, flagging the emotional shift while it's still small enough to handle cleanly. After that, you pushed the whole approach under pressure, where stress usually drives you back into old habits, and you saw how simplifying instead of intensifying keeps you out of escalation. Finally, you watched all of it come together on an ordinary, imperfect day, where the real success wasn't perfect understanding or agreement, but the absence of buildup, resentment, and late-night replay. When you look at the pattern as a whole, something important becomes obvious. Tests feel safer because they avoid exposure, but they keep you stuck in interpretation. Silence feels strong, but it forces both people into guessing. Directness feels risky, but it produces reality. And reality, even when it's uncomfortable, is lighter to carry than imagination. When you stop testing, you stop asking other people to prove your worth through mind reading. You take responsibility for your side of the interaction, and that alone restores dignity. This is also where reacting versus responding shows up most clearly. Reacting is fast, but it's sloppy. It trades short-term relief for long-term cost. Responding is slower, but it's precise. It doesn't guarantee the outcome you want, but it guarantees that you won't betray yourself by hiding what matters. Over time, that precision builds trust, not because other people suddenly behave perfectly, but because you become predictable to yourself. You know you'll speak before resentment takes root. Here are 3 things to do today to lock this in. The first is to identify one test you run on autopilot and name it clearly to yourself, whether that test looks like going quiet, delaying a reply, or dropping hints. The second is to interrupt that test the next time it appears by using one clean sentence, either naming the urge or stating the need, and stopping before it turns into explanation. The third is to practice restraint after you speak by letting the response stand as information, not something you need to manage, fix, or interpret as a verdict about you. Notice how practical this is. There's no demand that you become emotionally fearless overnight. There's no requirement to say everything all the time. You're simply choosing to speak earlier, smaller, and cleaner. That alone changes the emotional math. Small feelings stay small. Moments resolve instead of stacking. Nights end with less mental noise. Sleep improves not because life is perfect, but because you're no longer carrying conversations that never happened. If you're wondering what comes next, the natural follow-up to this lesson is learning how to hold your ground when clarity meets resistance. Once you stop testing and start communicating, the next challenge is staying steady when someone doesn't like what you say or doesn't give you the answer you hoped for. A logical next lesson is how to say no, or how to set a boundary, without guilt, justification, or over-explaining, because that's where self-respect gets practiced under real pressure. And remember this as you move forward, you don't build honest relationships by being easy to misunderstand. You build them by being clear, early, and calm. Every time you choose response over reaction, you reduce friction, protect the relationship from silent damage, and make your own internal life quieter. That's not just better communication. That's better control. If you feel messages like this need to reach more people, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.